Picture this, October 29, 1929, a day that would forever be etched in history as Black Tuesday. It was the day when the stock market, the heart of the American economy, began to beat erratically. The ticker tape machines that once sang the song of prosperity now echoed a dirge of financial doom. The Wall Street crash was like an economic earthquake. Its tremors felt far and wide, setting off a chain reaction that led to the most profound economic downturn of the 20th century, the Great Depression. In the blink of an eye, fortunes were lost, dreams were shattered, and a sense of uncertainty gripped the nation. The Roaring Twenties came to a screeching halt, replaced by a decade characterized by economic stagnation, widespread poverty, and unprecedented unemployment. The stock market crash of 1929 was just the beginning of a decade-long economic nightmare. But what led to this economic calamity? Let's delve deeper into the causes. First and foremost, the stock market crash in October of 1929. This cataclysmic event sent shockwaves throughout the global economy. The optimism of the Roaring Twenties came to a screeching halt as stock prices plummeted, wiping out millions of investors. This crash didn't cause the Great Depression by itself, but it certainly lit the fuse. Then, the dominoes began to fall. Bank failures became widespread. Over the course of the next few years, around 9,000 banks failed. Bank deposits were uninsured, so as banks failed, people lost their savings. The surviving banks, uncertain of the economic situation and concerned for their own survival, stopped being as willing to create new loans. This exacerbated the situation, leading to less and less spending. But it wasn't just Wall Street and the banking industry. The agricultural sector was in crisis too. During the Roaring Twenties, farmers produced more food than the market wanted. As a result, prices dropped. To compensate for the lower prices, farmers tried to produce even more food, which only made the problem worse. When the Depression hit, many farmers were unable to keep up with their mortgage payments and lost their farms. Internationally, the economic situation was no better. The United States had lent huge sums of money to European countries to rebuild after the First World War. As the U.S. economy faltered, so too did its ability to continue these loans, causing economic hardship abroad as well. And let's not forget the role of policy. The Federal Reserve's monetary policies in the years leading up to the Depression are widely criticized. The Fed failed to pump enough money into the economy to help banks make loans and stimulate spending. These factors combined, creating a perfect storm that led to the Great Depression. The Great Depression was not just an economic crisis, it was a human crisis. As the Roaring Twenties came to a screeching halt, the United States fell into a deep abyss of unemployment and poverty. The once bustling factories stood silent, and fields that were once bountiful lay barren. The nation's workforce found itself facing an unprecedented crisis. As the stock market crashed in late October of 1929, businesses began to fail. And with the failure of businesses came the loss of jobs. In the early years of the Depression, the unemployment rate skyrocketed from a mere 3% to a staggering 25% by 1933. That's 1 in 4 Americans without a job, without a means to put food on the table or a roof over their heads. Now let's put a face to these numbers. Imagine being a father, a breadwinner, who has to look into the eyes of his children and admit that there's no dinner tonight, or a mother who has to sell her wedding ring just to buy a loaf of bread. These were not isolated incidents. They were everyday realities. Farmers too were hit hard. Already grappling with the agricultural crisis of the 20s, the Great Depression was a double whammy. Crop prices dropped by 60%, pushing many farmers to the brink of bankruptcy. The streets of the cities were not much better. Once thriving metropolises became ghost towns, soup kitchens and bread lines became the new normal, with people queuing for hours just for a hot meal. The desperation was palpable, the despair overwhelming. In the face of such adversity, the American spirit shone. People helped each other, shared what little they had. They found strength in community, hope in unity. But the scars of the Great Depression ran deep. It was a time that tested the resolve of the nation, a period that exposed the fragility of economic prosperity. The Great Depression left millions jobless and destitute, a stark reminder of the human toll of economic downturns. In the face of such adversity, the government had to act. And act it did, under the determined leadership of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who took office in 1933, in the darkest days of the Great Depression. He brought with him a plan of epic proportions, a series of programs, public work projects, financial reforms, and regulations collectively known as the New Deal. This wasn't just a set of policies. The New Deal was a beacon of hope for millions of Americans, a promise that the government was taking steps to alleviate the suffering and restore the nation's economic health. It was based on 3 R's: relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery to help the economy bounce back, and reform to prevent a repeat of the economic disaster. One of the first actions under the New Deal was the establishment of the Civilian Conservation Corps, which provided jobs to young unemployed men who worked on projects like reforestation and infrastructure development. This program alone provided work and wages for over 2 million men during its existence. And then there was the Social Security Act of 1935, a pivotal piece of legislation that introduced a system of old age benefits for workers, benefits for victims of industrial accidents, unemployment insurance, aid for dependent mothers and children, the blind, and the physically handicapped. Not all of the New Deal's programs were as successful or as enduring as these, and the plan had its fair share of critics. Some felt it gave the government too much power, others believed it didn't go far enough. But there's no denying that it brought about significant changes both in the economy and in the American people's perception of their government. The New Deal marked a significant shift in the government's role in the economy, a legacy that continues to this day. It showed that the government was not just a distant bureaucratic entity, but a system that could step in, take action, and provide tangible help when its people were in need. The Great Depression was a time of hardship, but it was also a time of learning. The sheer scale of the economic collapse that occurred during the Great Depression left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of nations worldwide. It forced us to take a hard look at the systems that had failed us, and to question the laissez-faire economic philosophies that had dominated the previous era. In the United States, the experience of the Great Depression led to significant changes in economic policies and regulations. The laissez-faire approach, which advocated for minimal government intervention, was largely discredited in the face of the widespread suffering and economic instability. This spurred a shift towards a more active role for the government in managing the economy. The New Deal, a series of programs and policies implemented by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, marked a significant departure from the previous laissez-faire policies. It saw the implementation of financial regulations, including the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated commercial and investment banking to prevent the kind of risky speculation that had contributed to the stock market crash of 1929. The Great Depression also underscored the importance of social safety nets. The Social Security Act of 1935, another key pillar of the New Deal, established a system of old age benefits for workers, benefits for victims of industrial accidents, unemployment insurance, and aid for dependent mothers and children, the blind and the physically handicapped. This was a recognition that the government had a role to play in providing for the welfare of its citizens, especially during times of economic hardship. Internationally, the Great Depression led to a rethinking of economic and monetary policies. The gold standard, which had been a cornerstone of global economic systems, was largely abandoned in favor of more flexible exchange rates. This allowed governments to have more control over their domestic economies and to use monetary policy as a tool to manage economic fluctuations. But perhaps the most enduring lesson from the Great Depression is the understanding that economic crises are not just about numbers and financial markets. They are profoundly human experiences. The stories of those who lived through the Great Depression serve as a stark reminder of the human toll of economic instability. They underscore the importance of policies that prioritize human welfare and economic stability over unchecked speculation and greed. The Great Depression was a dark chapter in our history, but its lessons continue to guide us in navigating economic challenges. It taught us the importance of financial regulation, government intervention in times of economic crisis, and the need for social safety nets. As we face the economic uncertainties of the future, we would do well to remember these lessons. The Great Depression was a dark chapter in our history, but its lessons continue to guide us in navigating economic challenges.